The name of this section is sampling and bias, and we've now talked about sampling, but the next topic we need to talk about is bias. So let me go back for a minute to this beautiful drawing that I've made, and then I know you've made in your notes now as well, this one. So bias occurs when the data set is not representative of the target population. And you can see there's lots of places here at which that might happen, right? So going from inside out, the respondents might not be similar to the sample. Okay, the respondents might not be similar to the sample because I call people on the phone, right? Or I approach them in person and say, hey, do you want to be in my study? And the ones who say yes might be systematically different than the ones who say no, right? If I'm calling on the phone, who actually says yes to those surveys? I think like my grandma does, right? And that's it, right? Who wants to talk to me in front of the science center? The people who aren't rushing to class, right? Maybe that excludes an entire class of people who would have had different answers, but to my survey, because they all really love the class they're about to go to. But I don't observe any of those people because they're in that class at that moment, right? Rushing past me saying no to my survey. So that is called non-response bias. Non-response bias occurs when the respondents are not representative of the sample. So once I decided who I wanted to include in my survey, they did not all agree. This happens mostly in studies of people, just to say that, right? With my bags of dirt study, right? I choose where on the Wellesley campus to dig and find some soil samples. None of those soil samples are going to disagree, right? Probably not, right? Or I am studying mice. I decide which mice I'm going to include in my study. Do the mice get to disagree? No, right? So non-response bias is almost always about people. And it's when the respondents are not representative of the sample. So even if everything else is perfect, the sample population is the target population. The sample is randomly and perfectly chosen from the sample population. If the respondents are not representative of the sample, like in the end people say no, then you do not have a representative sample. Okay. Let's go back again to our picture. So now focusing on the sample, the green triangle, if the sample is not representative of the target population, that's also a problem, and that's called selection bias. And you can see here there's two places that might come from. It could come because the sample is not similar to the sample population, or it could come because the sample population is not similar to the target population. Both of those things have the same name, and that name is selection bias. So selection bias occurs when the sample is not representative of the target population because either one of two things happened. Either the sample population is not representative of the target, or the sample is not representative of the sample population. So if we think about this maybe in terms of our one of our example studies about households and household income in the US, so if my sample population is this list of phone numbers of households that I could call, if that list of phone numbers does not refer to households that are representative of all households in the US, I already have selection bias. Right, and that list of phone numbers is not going to be representative because some houses don't have phones at all, or they don't have listed phone numbers. Where do we even get this list of phone numbers? Right? Maybe it's people who submitted their phone numbers for I don't know, to some service that made them publicly available. If the list of phone numbers I start with to choose from is not representative of the target, I already have selection bias. And then, given that list of phone numbers, if the way I choose a sample from that list of phone numbers in the sample population is not representative, that's also bad, right? So suppose that I say, oh, I'm just going to choose the phone numbers that are on this first page of this document, right? But maybe the document has some pattern to it, right? Then I also have a problem that is also called selection bias. Or if we think of the example of people walking by me in front of the science center, the sample population there is not representative of the target, because the people who are walking by me at all in front of the Science Center are not representative of all Wellesley students. If you're abroad, you're not there. If you're off campus that day, you're not there. If you don't ever go to the Science Center, you're not there. So there's a problem already called selection bias, which is that data collection scheme does not have a sample population equivalent or representative of the target population. But in addition to that, once I'm standing in front of the Science Center, if I just like call out to people who look friendly, then also my sample population isn't even representative of my sample is not representative of the sample population, which itself is not representative of the target population. So those are the two types of bias. There are others, but those are the ones that I want us to focus on.